Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. It's good to be here with everybody. So sweet just to be able to chop it up a little bit. There's this beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which is kind of the essence of all spiritual teachings. And it says, it has this word parasparam, that when we get together and we talk about spiritual topics as people who are sincerely seeking, then it creates almost like a certain kind of sweetness. There's a taste that comes from that. That's very enlivening and very inspiring, and helps us to keep our momentum on the spiritual path. So I'm very grateful to all of you for making that possible today, and we'll see what we could do here. So dads are overrated. That's no attack on dads. Dads are actually very important, obviously. You see that playing out in the world. It's nice to have some kind of figure whom you can look up to. But that topic was specifically in relation, I don't mean to fire any shots here, but there's a particular religion, you could say, where God is referred to as the Father, which is a beautiful thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I'd like to assert that perhaps there's an even more colorful, beautiful way that you could actually develop a relationship with God, with divinity. And so you don't have to take my word for it. In fact, this kind of experience, this kind of relationship is something that we could all taste on our own, especially in circles like this where we get together and discuss. So, in that regard, I wanted to reference a particular verse from the Bhagavad Gita. And it goes a little something like this. Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam Susukam Kartam Avyayam. Now, I'll just preface by saying this is a life-changing verse. So if anybody doesn't want their life changing, you can cover your ears and maybe take a step outside. We won't detain you. Anybody? Okay, good. Buckle your seatbelts. So, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, 2nd verse, this knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. It is everlasting, and it is joyfully performed. We'll just read a little bit from the explanation there. So Prabhupada says, this chapter of Bhagavad Gita is called the King of Education, because it is the essence of all doctrines and philosophies explained before. Among the principal philosophers in India are Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Yajnavalkya, Shandilya, and Vaishvanara. And finally there is Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra. So there is no dearth of knowledge in the field of philosophy or transcendental knowledge. Now the Lord says that this 9th chapter is the king of all such knowledge, the essence of all knowledge that can be derived from the study of the Vedas and the different kinds of philosophy. It is the most confidential because confidential or transcendental knowledge involves understanding the difference between the soul and the body. And the king of all confidential knowledge culminates in devotional service. So the first thing that struck me about this little purport is the fact that we all need to get our information from somewhere. We all need to get our knowledge from somewhere. And traditionally, the father or the mother is one of the big people in our lives who will provide that infusion of knowledge, of understanding the world. And what's the whole purpose of knowledge? It's to actually help us become happy, help us feel satisfied, help us feel that we're doing the right thing in life. But very often nowadays, I don't mean to attack any particular dads out there, but it seems like the parental figures tend to misguide us in a certain way, in a way that is supposed to make us happy, but actually just makes us more dissatisfied and could even be actually physically or financially damaging. For example, I remember when I was in high school, I was trying to decide what to do with my life, which college to go to, and so forth, and I could see that something was kind of off. Like I could see like all my friends and like the kids who graduated before me, they were going to these private schools and paying like 60 grand a year to go there and would end up with this massive amount of debt afterwards. And oftentimes they had no idea what they even wanted to do. You know, they were 18 years old, they just kind of committed to something. They found themselves in a massive amount of debt, and they were basically handicapped from the time they were 21 or 22 years old. They couldn't really move about the world in a free way because they had this crushing debt that was weighing down on them. But 99 out of 100 parents that you talk to then, and probably now still, for the most part, will say that that's what you do. After high school, you go to college, you eat the debt, you know, but you get your degree, and then you could take that degree and hopefully get a good job, and, you know, you pay it back gradually. But to me, that just didn't make any sense, you know? And that's the thing about spiritual wisdom, actually, is spiritual wisdom is satisfying. Any kind of material understanding of things, there's always some kind of chink in the armor. There's always some aspect of it that just feels a little bit off. That is, if you analyze it. So something like going into a huge amount of debt, you know, at such a young age, even though it may appear to be, you know, bona fide based on what parents are saying and different authorities, if you really look into it a little bit, you can see actually, no, it's not. And so the first question we have to ask ourselves if we want real knowledge is, what kind of knowledge am I subscribing to? We could analyze that. We could see what kind of things are being pushed upon us. And oftentimes we'll find that even those things that are pushed upon us by our parents, unless you have, you know, certain kinds of parents, you'll find that they are actually illogical. And they'll end us up in a situation that is harmful. So me personally, I somehow or other, I decided, I actually had a good, I wouldn't say that anyone else whose mom didn't say this is not a good mom, but my mom said, you know, take your time. Maybe, you know, get to know yourself a little bit better. And she actually said I should go to India. I should go to India, kind of find myself, find who I am, you know, what I should do in the world. And then based on that, then I can make a decision from that. And so she was kind of plugged in, obviously a spiritual lady. And so what she was advertising that I do is get a little bit more bona fide knowledge, basically. Because how can you, I'll get right to you, how can you know what to do in the world if you don't know who you are, right? And so that's where Prabhupada is starting here. That's what the verse is really about, is there's so many different kinds of knowledge, so many different philosophies, understandings of the world, but the king of all those knowledges, the king of education, is to know the self. Because if you know who you are, then you could actually move in an effective way, where you can be happy and satisfied. But if a fish spends its whole life thinking it's a land mammal, and it's up on the beach, you know, flopping around, might have a hard time. Might not work out too well for him. But if someone comes and says, hey, you're a fish, you belong in the water, and he flops his way back to the water, then he'll be happy, he'll be satisfied. So that's why it's so important to have a good source of knowledge. You had a question?
You said whoever tells you this is not a good parent. What were you referring to as to?
No, I was saying that not everyone who says that is necessarily not a good parent.
And that was referring to like the, you know, we need to go to
that
college.
We should like find ourselves first before, you know, deciding what to do, kind of thing.
It kind of got me baffled by saying that.
Yeah.
Because you're saying that the king of education is to know thyself, but then we have to. But if we find ourselves before doing anything that we want to do, am I hearing it correctly, or?
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So that is the most important thing. I mean, there's different levels, I guess you could say, of good or bad, you know, parents.
Okay.
You know? So, you know, someone who sees from a spiritual platform, they can see in one sense everybody is trying their best. They're trying to do what they think is for the ultimate good.
Okay.
In one sense or another. And so from that platform, it's hard to really condemn anybody as saying like you're bad and you're good, you know. But in one sense, what you're getting to is correct. On the absolute platform, what's actually good is what's good for the soul.
Okay.
And that is a very specific thing. It's not a spectrum. So it's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other things so far? Any thoughts or questions or comments? Okay. So we'll continue on here. Next Prabhupada says, generally, people are not educated in this confidential knowledge. They're educated in external knowledge. As far as ordinary education is concerned, people are involved in so many departments: politics, sociology, physics, chemistry, mathematics, astronomy, engineering, etc. There are so many departments of knowledge all over the world and many huge universities, but there is unfortunately no university or educational institution where the science of the spirit soul is instructed. Yet the soul is the most important part of the body. Without the presence of the soul, the body has no value. Still, people are placing great stress on the bodily necessities of life, not caring for the vital soul. It's a great point, right? I see a lot of billboards walking around New York City. Anyone ever seen anything that alludes to the soul? No, it's pretty much exclusively what? Materialism, the bodily platform, the body, yeah. And so it's kind of a scary situation, actually, when you think about it, because it's almost like we found ourselves in this current that's pulling us towards something that will actually make us miserable. Pretty much everybody, it's very rare, that's why it's being said here that this is the most confidential knowledge. Why? Because basically everybody is thinking that something that is actually detrimental to their happiness is what will bring them happiness. And so in that way, people spend literally their entire lives climbing up this ladder just to realize it's actually against the wrong wall. It should have been over there. They're climbing to something that will bring them no sense of peace, no sense of satisfaction, pretty much exclusively anxiety. But they're unaware. They've been misguided. It's the blind leading the blind, as it's described. You have people in power, whether it's teachers, politicians, whoever it might be, that are offering guidance, but they themselves are completely misguided, as it is. And so you create this dead-end civilization. Everybody continuously is running into a wall, or climbing up a wall, just to realize that actually there's nothing up there. There's nothing up there, and they wasted their time. So, not to get too dark and dreary here, but there is an upside here. So that's where the Bhagavad Gita comes in. And that's why Krishna says, towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita, that actually nobody is more dear to me. Krishna says this. Nobody is more dear to me than someone who shares this confidential knowledge with others. Why? Because people, again, are just completely lost and doing things that'll hurt them. And so Krishna, divinity, who in one sense is the Father, he has a very sweet, loving relationship with all of these different souls, even though they may be running here and there and doing all kinds of things that aren't good for them and may even be harmful to others. Still, like any good parent, he loves them and he wants them to ultimately come back to him. So Krishna says very clearly that no one's more dear to him than somebody who takes these misguided souls by the hand and lovingly guides them back to what will actually make them happy and what will be of the utmost good for the entire world. So somehow or other it's been covered over, and you can see it degrading over the years, right? I think one of the big hallmarks of a society is who they look up to. Who are the people that they consider to be the topmost? Who are the people in the posters that are on the kids' walls? And so forth. And so back in the day, not even that long ago, people, if you went into somebody's home, you'd see a picture of St. Francis, you'd see a picture maybe of the Pope. Years prior, you'd see pictures of knights, great knights, or at least those were the people that they admired, that they looked up to, that they told stories about, that they wanted to be like when they grew up. There was this sense that chivalry is noble, that sacrifice is noble, that putting oneself second, kind of serving the greater good, the greater whole, was what was actually laudable. But nowadays, who are the posters of? We don't have to say any specific names, but I think we could imagine. Singers, sports stars, actors, maybe actresses. And what are these people in general? What do they represent? Just for the most part, this sense of, of gluttony, you know, of, 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 of manipulating the world according to their desires, of being able to uh, have command over others. Everybody wants to look at them. Everybody wants to see them. Everybody admires them. Yes, with that job.
So yesterday I saw a poster. It was this site that had all different band posters,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them was just the rock star. It was the guy just sitting on the toilet.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
I was listening to Green Day album, and it's called Dookie. And me and my friend were like, "Wow, look at what we're listening to."
Yeah.
An album called Dookie.
Yeah. Yeah. Somehow or other, you know, we found ourselves in this position where we're glorifying something that actually is valueless.
But what's like valueless about music that people connect with and like?
It's not that music itself is inherently valueless.
Of course.
Like, for example, the music we were just doing, there's so much value to it. But it's a matter of the way it's used, you know? So, like, for example, there's a song you might hear going down the road, you know, that is all about, you know, I got a nice car, and I got a nice girlfriend, and I got a big house, and all those kinds of things. And, you know, that is one category of music.
Yeah.
And then you look at something like, not to throw it back too far, somehow it's in my mind, like the We Are the World song that they did back in like the 90s
Oh
or
yeah,
whatever,
that's great.
with something to benefit AIDS or some kind of, you know, they got all the stars together. And so the purpose behind it was different. So music itself is so beautiful, and it's a matter of the way that it's used. Nothing is inherently bad, of course, as I think you know. But different things could be applied differently and have a completely different effect. Like Prabhupada gives the example of a knife, in that somebody who's robbing a bank, you know, might use a knife to be able to steal money, whereas a doctor could save somebody's life with a knife. So it's not that the knife itself is inherently bad, but it's a matter of the purpose for which it's used. And so music is something that is actually the most powerful thing in existence. Practically, sound
I agree.
vibration. To start the entire universe, it's understood that the seed that from which the universe actually sprung from was a seed of sound vibration. And if you look under things with a powerful enough telescope, you'll see that everything's actually vibrating. And we know that vibration creates sound. And so music is the most powerful thing in all of existence. And if it's used properly, it can actually extricate us from all of the material encumbrances and reestablish us into our natural spiritual state. So it's a matter of the way it's used, for sure. There's definitely nothing wrong with music itself. Yes?
I think you could say the same thing about, you know, education in general. I do understand that the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and a lot of other Vedic philosophies are explaining generally how the universe works.
Mm.
But you mentioned a doctor. A doctor had to go to school to get education to save a life, potentially. I just think that in general, if society were to move away from a particular style of commerce, then people can have the opportunity to choose their path according to their dharma, their purpose.
Mm.
But because our parents didn't know any better,
Mm.
that they give us advice to rack up student loan debt just out of the base of, one, they didn't have it themselves to pay full out, or two, they didn't live in the right country where education is free and paid
Yeah.
for by the government. I do believe that education is important. As a former teacher, I do know that it can change lives for the better.
Mm.
It's just, what is the end goal? Is the end goal just to have a fat check?
Yes.
Or is the end goal is to contribute to the society that you live in?
Mm.
I think once we change our mentality of what we're really here for,
Mm.
and I'm so happy that the 4 questions came out, because when I first arrived here, I was just like, yeah, I need help finding my purpose. What is it that I'm here to do?
Mm.
Luckily, I realized I'm a healer.
Mm.
but that came with throwing a lot of spaghetti on the wall
Mhm.
and seeing what fell to the floor. And the thing that stuck was something that has always been around my cipher anyway.
Mm.
But for those who are a little bit, quote unquote, lost, as you say, I think having an environment that contributes to one's willpower to achieve that dharma while they're here is so important.
Mm.
So yeah, that's my piece on that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful point. Thank you so much. And that's exactly what the world needs, right? Is good teachers, good healers, people who can act. Because what is the real role of education? It's to actually heal that lifetime after lifetime trauma that's keeping us glued to our old habits. And we've developed these habits over lifetimes that keep us in the dark. And the real role of a teacher, the real role of any leader in society is to help us heal from those things so that we could actually remember who we are instead of just running on autopilot into the darkness and more, up the wrong ladder over and over again. So it's a great point. And again, Krishna says it. That's why somebody like that is so dear to him. Otherwise, the world's a very dark place. But yeah, that's why we're here. That's why we're here. Parasparam, to be together, to be reminding each other of our true nature, which is spiritual, is not material, is reminiscent of the king of education. So continue on. Yes.
We have Keshava Swami. He does a nice rendition where he says, means. So means are your education, your talents, your wealth, your beauty, whatever you have. That the means without meaning. That is materialism. Because generally we think materialism is the means. Like you have a lot of means. You have, oh, this guy has more money. He's a materialistic person. This one's poor. He's not materialistic. But he says means without meaning. That's materialism. And then the Sanskrit is artha, which is wealth or valuable things, without pumartha, pushartha, the meaning, the goal of life is anartha. It's unvaluable. It's something that holds you back.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was nice. And that's in the Bhagavatam, or one of our main books in the second canto. It defines like what materialism is, and it's how we see this, and we see it separate from its source. You know, it's like if I find a wallet and I don't recognize, oh, that's the owner's wallet, then you give it back to him. That's the problem, is when we see it in a dualistic way of separating it from the owner. So
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? You have something?
No, just
Oh, okay.
nice.
Thank you, bro. Okay, let's keep going. The Bhagavad Gita, especially from the second chapter on, stresses the importance of the soul. In the very beginning, the Lord says that this body is perishable and that the soul is not perishable. That is a confidential part of knowledge. Simply knowing that the spirit soul is different from this body and that its nature is immutable, indestructible, and eternal. But that gives no positive information about the soul. Sometimes people are under the impression that the soul is different from the body, and that when the body is finished, or one is liberated from the body, the soul remains in a void and becomes impersonal. But actually that is not the fact. How can the soul, which is so active within this body, be inactive after being liberated from the body? It is always active. If it is eternal, then it is eternally active. And its activities in the spiritual kingdom are the most confidential part of spiritual knowledge. These activities of the spirit soul are therefore indicated here as constituting the king of all knowledge, the most confidential part of all knowledge. Beautiful, beautiful. So far we talked a lot about kind of like what not to do. I thought maybe also we could talk about what to do. And so that's what Prabhupada is getting into here. And that's really the crux of the verse. The king of education isn't just that you're not the body, but it's actually about who you are. So we each have an identity. We each are a soul, and we have an eternal nature. And the soul's eternal nature is to love. is to love and be loved. And don't take my word for it. This is all coming from the scripture, and virtually any scripture that you look into. There's always this principle of love. And even if you don't look at the scripture, if you look at what's actually going on in the modern world, what are people interested in? Pretty much any movie, any book, any TV show, you'll see there's always a love interest. The biggest show right now, I think, in the world, at least according to my two little sisters, is a show called Love Island. I haven't heard about it. I hope you haven't. I wouldn't call it Love Island. So is that really love? No, I don't think so. What is really love? Real love means unceasing. Doesn't mean I like you for a little bit, you're really pretty, and let's get together, and then I kind of get bored of you, or I don't like the way that you chew, or something, and then I go and do something else with somebody else. That's not real love. It's described that the closest thing to real love, the love that is actually satisfying to the soul, is the love between the mother and the child. The mother, when she gets up at 3 a.m. to tend to her child who's crying hysterically, isn't thinking, what am I going to get out of this? What are you going to do for me? Give and take, really, especially at that point. It's purely about, I want to be there for you. Even though it might be stressful, and it might be arduous, there's such a deep satisfaction in that relationship. So much so that most women who become mothers, for them that's a real turning point in their life in terms of what they consider to be the most important thing to them. For them, their children, there's nothing more important. And it's not because their kids are giving them money, or they're providing some kind of material value to them. It's simply because of that love, that loving exchange, that very close to pure love that they found in that relationship. That's what makes it so valuable to them. So this is the most confidential part of knowledge. This is the king of education, is that the soul's nature isn't simply to give and take. The soul isn't simply meant to extract things from the material world for its own enjoyment, but it's meant to sacrifice for its beloved. There's a beautiful song, the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. And that's a fact. It's a fact. I think anybody can argue, even on a more mundane level, that they feel happier when instead of trying to see what I can get for myself, they sacrifice for something else. Oftentimes, you'll see that people who get a ton of money, say, once they get it, instead of being happy, instead of feeling satisfied, they just feel more and more anxiety, actually. And it leads them into this darker and darker place, or at least it can. They maybe get into debt, they feel like there's never enough. There's never enough. They always need more and more and more. Even though they thought that if I just hit this level or that level, or I got this house or this car, then I'd finally be satisfied. Actually, because the soul is spiritual, by nature, no amount of material thing could ever satiate it. We find that real happiness comes from sacrifice. Nayam deho deha bajamni loke kastanka manarhita vid pujamye tapo divyam puchakaye nishatvam shudyad yasmat brahma sakyam tunantam. Rishabdev in the Bhagavad Purana says to his sons, speaking of dads, whatnot, he says to his sons that, my dear boys, of all the living entities who take birth in this material world, one who's accepted the human form of life should not simply work hard day and night for sense gratification, for just grabbing things for oneself, for one's own enjoyment. Because after all, what's the difference between us buying a car or getting a bunch of money and a dog, seizing a rat, on the side of the street for its own enjoyment? At its core, it's actually the same exact thing. We're taking for our own enjoyment. He says, real human life is meant for sacrifice. He says, by sacrifice, we don't just get some temporary sensation, like the dog does when it eats something, or like we do when we eat something, or when we enjoy something, we acquire something, some money. But we get Brahma Saukyam, or eternal happiness, happiness which is completely satisfying to the self and which continues forever. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but whenever you get something, it always feels like you never actually acquire it, in a sense, right? It's almost like it's, as soon as you get it, it's automatically starts slipping through your fingers.
It's a memory.
I remember I used to play poker. I don't know if anyone else is a poker person here. Texas Hold'em. But, you know, so when you would win like a big pot, say, there's so much pressure, you know, you're trying to read the guy, you know, and you make the right play, and then what happens, you win this big pot, everybody sees that you won. It's this very like kind of exhilarating feeling. But I can remember in those instances, as soon as you start pulling those chips towards you, that exhilarating feeling, it kind of gives way to this feeling of anxiety, of like, how am I going to maintain this? How am I going to make sure that that guy doesn't take it from me? You know, and so that's how it is in the material world, is no matter how much we get, actually the more we get, the more anxiety that those things can breed. But when we tune into the soul, to the soul's needs, there's never any sense of want. As soon as we start catering to the nature of the soul, this most important thing in all of existence, in all of our lives, we start developing that love and acting in such a way so as to cultivate that love, to share it with others, then automatically there is satisfaction, and we feel a very specific sense of direction in life. Not that we're just, you know, looking around and looking who might come and take it from us, but it's the opposite. We're looking around and thinking, how can I give this to other people? So it's a complete 180, and in reality, it's the only way to live. Every other way only leads to more and more misery and dissatisfaction and disappointment. But if we could tap into that love, no matter what our material situation is, we'll be satisfied. All you need is a little bit of food so that you have enough to sustain yourself, and then you have your practice, you have your sadhana, where you can connect with that love, connect with divinity, connect with Krishna, and in that way feel completely satisfied. It's a very real thing. And that brings me to my next point I want to make, which is centered on this word pratyaksha. It says, this is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives pratyaksha, because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. So, the beautiful thing about Krishna consciousness, about the practice of bhakti yoga, is that it's not something that you need to just believe. I think a lot of the time, in certain spheres, we find that eventually people kind of hit a wall, maybe in regard to a certain philosophical point, or maybe they feel they've been practicing for so long, but they're not really getting, you know, what was advertised. But the beautiful thing about chanting specifically is that you can actually experience what you're reading about, what you're hearing about. And that's the only real way to know whether or not something's real, is to have that direct perception. So that's what bhakti yoga affords us. By chanting and hearing, by living a lifestyle that is in line with what helps us to cultivate that love for divinity, that we can have an experience of divinity. And the Bhagavad Purana and the Bhagavad Gita, two of our principal texts, are full of these kinds of stories of people who applied themselves to a process and within a very short time had an unmistakable experience of divinity, which you really can't do without. The reason why people are able to go on forever in material life is because they're getting constant feedback. Even though it's a very cheap feedback, you're getting, you know, some sensation, you're getting some pleasure, some ego boost. Still, it's giving you something that kind of keeps you moving in that direction. In spiritual life, we could have the same thing. If we are applying ourselves and doing what's necessary to put ourselves in front of Krishna, then we can experience Krishna and we'll feel ever increasingly enthusiastic in that regard. Prabhupada says a little bit before this, a couple of chapters before that, philosophy, feeling it out. But religion without philosophy is just sentiment or even fanaticism. So you need to have both. You have to have a philosophy that could put you on a path towards having an actual experience, a religious experience. So that's the beautiful thing about kirtan specifically, is that if we absorb ourselves in it, then we can have those kinds of experiences that validate our practice and keep us inspired on the path. Are there any other thoughts or questions, reflections so far?
So I know chanting is very important. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama.
Yes.
How can we help others understand how to chant wholeheartedly? Like wholeheartedly instead of just focusing on the chant. For me, I understood that I've been practicing prayer for a long time, and I would watch my grandma pray, and I understand how my mom prayed. I listened to how my dad would explain his teaching as well. He told me about the Bible at one point, but like ultimately my own practice was like praying wholeheartedly. So I think certain people don't get to see the results that they want because they don't know how to tap in wholeheartedly. So how can we help others to understand, you know, chanting or praying wholeheartedly, like using the proper intention to like, you know, pray.
It's a good question. I mean, it's a tough one because it definitely has to come from them. You know, it's not something we can impose upon them. But I would say that connecting them to the process in some way will reveal things to them. Will remove blockages. If there's any kind of service that you could connect them with, then oftentimes you'll see that it actually works magic.
Okay.
They get connected to other sincere spiritual practitioners. They start doing a little bit of sacrifice, right? A little bit of yajna. A little bit of, instead of just doing what I want, let me put my immediate desires aside and give myself in some way. So that could be something very small. I remember I had a friend who I wanted to kind of bring into the fold a bit more. And I had another friend who was working on this little book with all these little articles, and he was into editing. And so we gave it to him, and he started doing some little edits on it. And sure enough, soon enough, he got interested more in what he was reading and started attending, you know, some different classes and kirtans, and he was able to kind of get inspired in that way. So different things inspire different people, for sure. There's all different kinds of kirtans as well. Sometimes they'll be kind of, you know, intense, kind of rock and roll style kirtan. Some people like that. Others prefer kind of more mellow, melodic kind of vibe. So the beautiful thing about this practice is it's so wide-reaching. There's something for everybody. So to kind of find the person or the people or the kirtan that you feel somebody would really appreciate and connect with is an effective practice.
Okay.
Hey, yes, Ru.
What kind of experiences can do the people in the book get? You got? What are some of these experiences?
Well, the hallmark one is Narada Muni, you know, who he was just a little boy, son of a maidservant, very kind of, you know, so-called lower class type of personality, which is interesting. It's very radical. That's why the Bhagavatam is so cool, because it kicks out all cheating philosophies, all cheating religions. So oftentimes you'll see this kind of tendency that only the people of a certain class are bona fide to read this or to understand this. But the Bhagavatam is full of stories of people who were regular people, who had the topmost kind of experience of divinity. So he was one of those kids who found himself in an unfortunate situation. His mom was bitten by a snake when he was around 5 years old, and she died. But just before then, he had a run-in with some saints who gave him a little bit of a taste of devotional service, of what it's like to engage in the service of Krishna. And so, with great determination, he engaged himself in that way. He went to the forest, and he decided, this is going to be the main thing that I do in my life. And so, while he was practicing, then Krishna himself appeared to him, very much literally. And it's described that in that moment, everything else around him appeared utterly insignificant. He could see that there was no greater goal in all of existence than to reestablish this moment of direct connection with divinity. It is exactly what the soul's been longing for forever. You could imagine, after billions and billions and billions of lifetimes, to finally get that thing for which you've always been searching for. The experience is unlike anything else, practically. It's the stuff of movies, the prodigal son, who goes away for some time, endures all kinds of tribulations and ups and downs, so forth. But then finally at the end, there's a return home. And so Narada Muni had that kind of experience at a very young age. And very interestingly, Krishna said to him that, yes, I'm here now, but you won't be with me like this again up until the very end of your life. I'm giving you this experience so that you could see that you're on the right track. And if you continue on in this mood of service and dedication, then you'll come to me, just like this at the end. So it's a very beautiful thing. So oftentimes Krishna will give experiences like that, where he kind of pulls back the blinds so that we could see reality, who we actually are, and what our relationship is with him. And those are the things that keep us going in spiritual life, I would say. Oftentimes, just like, if you're ever walking through the mall, maybe an Annie Ann's. Anyone ever had Annie Ann's before? Pretzels? Pretzels.
Oh,
yeah. Nobody else?
It's like a blue gold bag.
Yeah, like the blue pretzel bag.
I'm more of a Cinnabon girl.
Cinnabon girl, okay. So even them sometimes, they'll be standing out there and be giving free samples. And the whole idea is to give you a little taste, so you can see what you're missing out on. So Krishna's the same way, kind of give us a little taste. This is what you have the potential to experience. And it doesn't cause you to have any stomach issues, is the nice part about it. So I recommend it over Indians, generally. Anybody else?
I had a thought
Yes.
that I've been sitting on for a while. You mentioned your mother was so intelligent to tell you to find yourself and go to India. What age were you when you went?
I was 18.
18? And you just knew that was the path coming back.
Yeah, she gave me a Bhagavad Gita when I was 15, and I got really into it. I really liked the Gita, and I could say that I had a very deep conviction that if I was going to actually be successful in life, then I had to attain enlightenment, basically. I had to have self-realization.
And if anybody else other than your mother would have suggested that, would you have taken it seriously?
Probably not as much. No, I had a lot of respect for her. I still do. Yeah, she's been a great influence on me.
Speaking of being a teacher, one of the classes I had to teach was on Bill Gates of all people. And somewhere in his timeline, he eventually went to India to find his guru. Steve Jobs does the same thing. He went to India to find a mystic. Sam Altman.
They also ate in Portland.
Sam Altman,
Temple.
the founder of
No
OpenAI
shit.
Yes.
and ChatGPT,
Crazy.
also went to India.
Oh, wow.
And what I find with just those three, because there's many, they have come back and created, a few of them were college dropouts. They have created things that kind of take us away from spirituality. And I always thought that was interesting of these three men that will go to a country that is, you know, famous for spirituality and come back and invent things for us to kind of like draw us back into materialism. What was like the purpose of that? You may not have the answer for this, but this is something that I've been pondering. If anybody wants to chime in on it later, you know, I'm thinking in my mind, is this a plan of Krishna to bring forth the next appearance of what is called Kalki for those that are enlightened, to just be like, all right, deuces, we're out of here. We've completed the mission. This is the end. You know, that's what I'm thinking in my head. Because why else would they do that after going there and meeting people that were supposed to help humanity at large?
It's a great point. It's a great point. I would say there's a beautiful purport in the 14th verse of the 10th canto, 14th chapter, 8th verse, where Hridayananda Maharaj describes that actually the world is a kind of cosmic sensitivity training. So the world is designed in such a way, not for us to become comfortable, but to make us a little bit distressed. Because in that distress is the seed of transformation. Al Gore, in his Inconvenient Truth documentary, references this study that they did where they put a bunch of frogs in 2 different rooms, one of which had lukewarm water, the other of which had hot water. And in the room with the lukewarm water, all the frogs got in the water, they got comfortable, and then they died because it wasn't good for them. In the hot water room, they all touched the water, felt that it was not good for them, and then they got out and then survived. They were all alive. So in the same way, for us, the world has become such a dark place. And practically every day there's a new news story that makes you think, this is absolutely absurd. What am I doing here? And that's exactly what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make you think, what the hell am I doing? I don't belong here. This is crazy. Otherwise, if everything was just nice and kind of utopian, then people would get comfortable in a situation that's actually bad for them. And that's ultimately detrimental to their ultimate salvation and extrication from the material world. So for that reason, it's described that many beings on higher planets even are longing to take birth on planet Earth at this time in Kali Yuga. Because it's such a dark place, it becomes obvious what's actually beneficial, what's actually good. And we have a very great opportunity in the form of Sankirtan, which is the prescribed method for this age of Kali Yuga, by which we can get out of the entanglement of the material world, where simply by chanting and hearing, simply by absorbing ourselves in spiritual music effectively and sharing it with others, we can become completely enlightened and have a huge impact on the world around us, become completely liberated. So in that sense, it could be beneficial, you could say. Oftentimes, like, you know, so we pass through, I don't want to get too deep into it, but we pass through all these other ages where things are much more ideal, and look how many of us are still around, you know. So things were so nice, you know, in previous ages that people got comfortable. And now it's kind of the final chance where things are going to get very uncomfortable. And it's going to become very apparent that this is not a place where we're meant to just hang out, but we're meant to perform sacrifice, and engage in activities that will help us attain perfection, spiritual perfection, not just comfortable material life. Yes, Ruth?
Just note about the term sacrifice, because it's, in English, we have in Sanskrit this word yajna, and it symbolizes like the fire sacrifice, but oftentimes in English we have like we have the idea of sacrifice as like some animal, some like cult thing, some crazy thing, some great loss. And then you find in Bhagavad Gita, it talks about different forms of sacrifice. And the word yajna in this sense is often means like, instead of like what you said, the sense of taking, but rather offering. And so that's like another word that could be used as a translation of this term, is like rather moving through life in the sense of taking, but rather offering back to the source. And it's like a flip of the consciousness. Because otherwise we sacrifice and it's like, it's kind of gets mixed with other things that don't really fit in with what the terminology, like even like when we say surrender, sometimes we might think like you're being held by a gun and it's, I surrender, but it's like, it's a different kind of, that term doesn't really fit that kind of motif.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, I was listening to Srila Prabhupada this morning, a lecture that he was giving, and he said that he was in California, and then there's this billboard, there's a movie billboard, and it says, "Is there sex after death?" And he was saying, people are concerned about this because if they knew the answer, then they wouldn't be afraid of death. It's like, that's what they're really concerned about. And he said, yeah, there's all kinds of species of life. You can take birth, and there's death, there's sex, there's food. But he said, but it always comes with the material problems, and there's material misery. And he said, just like in the next life, the material body, there's these things. But if you examine, if everything is coming from a source, then the source has everything. So the intimacy that might be in a sexual relationship, that intimacy exists within God. That don't think it's just like God the Father, that actually there's all kinds of different relationships, that God possesses everything you see here, but in its most refined form. Just like sunlight far away from the sun, it's not the refined form. It's like, it's dim and it creates shadows. But sunlight, when it's found on the surface of the source, there's no shadows there. It's just, it's in its most infinite form. And so similarly, in the spiritual world, you have God with the romantic relationship, friendship, all these other dynamic relationships, but they're in their perfect form. It's not just like the shadow form that manifests in various imperfections.
That's a great point. Thank you. Anybody else?
Oh yeah, and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs went to the Portland Temple and ate
Crazy.
prasadam every Sunday. One of them would walk for
I didn't know Bill Gates. Too.
both at the Portland Temple. Yeah,
That's
both
crazy.
both went to the Portland Temple, ate prasadam. One of them walked for hours every Sunday to get that delicious vegetarian feast. And the best place to get vegetarian food is the Hare Krishna Temple in Portland. And so they would walk
barefoot, I think.
What they do with that, that's.
Yeah, so I wanted to end on that point too. If we accept love as the highest thing, then the highest form of divinity must be that form with which we exchange that highest love. And so the kind of love that one has for one's father is very nice, but it's nowhere near as intense in general as the love, say, between paramour, a lover and a beloved, or in some cases even between friends. There's a certain flavor that is existing there that is unique and oftentimes can be even more overwhelming and even more sweet and it's not limited to one particular type. So because God himself is unlimited, it means that there's an unlimited number of ways with which we could exchange love with him, not just the Father. And so the King of Education is to understand our own personal relationship with God, with divinity, which is unique to each and every one of us and is the very reason for our existence. I remember growing up, there was a girls' private school nearby, and we crossed paths, we're friends with some of them because it wasn't so far from my regular high school. And I remember when they would post on Facebook, they would have these pictures of themselves like in school and stuff, and they were all basically like in their pajamas, basically like in sweatpants, maybe a sweater, t-shirt, hair not done, no makeup. Whereas the girls who were at my school always, were dressed to the nines, for the most part, and had makeup and had their hair done. They were all dressed up. And so I was thinking, why is that? And it became kind of apparent that we dress up, we make ourselves look nice when we want to be perceived in a certain way by others. We want to be appreciated by others. And because that's an all-girls school, maybe there's a little bit less of that motivation because there's no boys there that they feel inspired to look nice for. Not all of them, but it's kind of a general theme. So in the same way, when it comes to God, the reason for all of our existence is because it makes it a little bit more fun for God and for divinity, that he could have people who appreciate him, that he can dress up for, that he could exchange with, like he could have beautiful, dynamic relationships with, and to have beings like us who you can kind of show off for a little bit, and he can love. So we just kind of touched on the surface there. Obviously, it's an ocean of varieties that we could dive into in regard to that topic. But the key theme is that there's so many different forms of education, knowledge, wisdom, philosophy in the world. But the king of all education is that philosophy, that understanding which allows us to understand who we are and what is our relationship with divinity. And if we can live in that, then we can be successful in the world and we'll actually attain real happiness. So, thank you very much. Appreciate all of you. And Hare Krishna. Haribo. Now we'll have wonderful Mani Manjari. We'll chant a little bit of kirtan. And then the grand finale.
I'll serve you a nice dinner. Right here.
A wonderful feast.
Very short, just really short. We're a little over time.